Hey there movie lovers, welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're heading into the dusty frontier of spaghetti westerns to take a closer look at the legendary 1964 classic A Fistful of Dollars. Directed by Sergio Leone and starring Clint Eastwood, this gritty western helped redefine the genre and launched Eastwood into international stardom. But behind the ponchos, pistols and squinting standoffs, there are some fascinating stories from the making of the film. So saddle up as we uncover 20 things you never knew about A Fistful of Dollars. The movie was filmed in Spain, primarily in areas around Madrid and Almeria. The production lasted just 8 weeks and was completed on a modest budget of around $200,000. With such a limited budget, the cast and crew had to work without many of the comforts typically found on film sets. There were no elaborate trailers or modern facilities. In one interview, Clint Eastwood recalled the conditions rather bluntly. "We had no electricity, we didn't have a trailer with a toilet, we just went out behind the rocks." Sergio Leone came across a tree while scouting locations that he believed would be perfect for the hanging tree seen at the beginning of the film. Determined to use it, the production team had the tree dug up and relocated so it could be placed exactly where he wanted it for the scene. After briefly considering Henry Fonda, director Leone first offered the role of the man with no name to James Coburn, but Coburn proved too expensive for the production. Charles Bronson was then approached, yet he turned the part down, describing it as the worst script I have ever seen. The role was next offered to Richard Harrison, who also declined, but suggested that Leone look at the cast of the television series Rawhide. He then approached Rawhide star Eric Fleming, who passed on the role but recommended his co-star Clint Eastwood instead, and the rest, as they say, is history. At the time, Clint Eastwood was bound by his contract for the TV series Rawhide, which prohibited him from appearing in films in the United States while he was on hiatus from the show. However, the agreement did permit him to accept film roles in Europe. Eastwood played a key role in shaping the distinctive visual style of his character. The black jeans, the hat and the black cigars were sourced from shops in California. The poncho, meanwhile, was bought in Spain. Eastwood even cut the cigars into 3 smaller pieces himself so they would appear shorter on screen. He was in fact a non-smoker. Because the film was an Italian, West German, Spanish co-production, a significant language barrier existed on set. Clint Eastwood often had difficulty communicating directly with the director and the largely Italian crew. As a result, Eastwood frequently relied on stuntman Benito Stefanelli, who helped bridge the gap by acting as an unofficial interpreter during the production. The film is essentially a remake of the Japanese film Yojimbo. The film's release in the United States was delayed by 3 years after the Yojimbo screenwriters filed a lawsuit against the filmmakers for breach of copyright. They ultimately won the case. As part of the settlement, they received 15% of the film's worldwide gross, along with exclusive distribution rights in Japan, Taiwan and South Korea. Writer-director Akira Kurosawa later remarked that he ended up earning more money from this project than he had from Yojimbo itself. The film was originally titled The Magnificent Stranger. The film's name was not changed to A Fistful of Dollars until just 3 days before its theatrical premiere. Remarkably, no one informed the film's star Clint Eastwood about the last-minute change. As a result, Eastwood remained largely unaware of the growing positive buzz surrounding the film. It was only 3 weeks later that an agent pointed it out to him after spotting an article about the film in Variety magazine. When Eastwood arrived on the set, he was surprised by how little the Italian crew and writers knew about the historical realities of the American West they were attempting to portray. Many of the details in the script reflected a rather loose understanding of the period. At one point, Eastwood had to point out that coonskin caps were associated with frontiersmen and trappers of the Davy Crockett era in the early 19th century, around the 1820s. They were not typically worn by gunfighters or townspeople in the American West and Mexico of the 1870s, the period in which the film was meant to take place. As was common with many Italian productions of the period, A Fistful of Dollars was filmed entirely without recorded dialogue on set. Instead, all scenes were shot silently, with the dialogue and sound effects added later during post-production through dubbing. Because of this approach, Clint Eastwood did not record his own dialogue for the film until 1967, when it was being prepared for its release in the United States. In 1975, A Fistful of Dollars aired on ABC, with a newly created 4.5-minute prologue designed to soften the film's violence for TV audiences. Written and directed by Monty Hellman, the scene featured Harry Dean Stanton as a prison warden who offers a condemned inmate a pardon if he agrees to travel to San Miguel and deal with its warring gangs. To represent the prisoner, the filmmakers used archival footage of Clint Eastwood. The prologue appeared in several early television broadcasts, but was later removed. Gian Maria Volonte did not get along with Sergio Leone, who grew weary of his theatrical acting style and what he perceived as an arrogant manner on set. Volonte did attempt to strike up a friendship with Clint Eastwood, but the language barrier, along with their opposing political views, prevented any real rapport from developing. Volonte himself did not hold the film or its sequel in particularly high regard, later telling interviewers that he viewed them largely as paycheck roles between more personal projects. Eastwood's famous squint, one of the most recognizable features of his on-screen persona, was not originally a deliberate acting choice. Instead, it developed naturally during filming, as a reaction to the harsh conditions on set. Much of the production was shot outdoors under the blazing sun, and the intense brightness was further amplified by the powerful high-wattage arc lamps used for lighting at the time. Before this film, American movies usually staged gunshots in a predictable way. One shot showed the gunman firing, followed by a separate shot of the victim being hit and collapsing. Clint Eastwood knew this had long been the standard approach, but he chose not to mention it to director Sergio Leone. Instead, Leone filmed the first major act of violence in the film over Eastwood's shoulder, placing the camera as though the viewer was standing beside him. The technique gave the moment a far more immediate and impressive impact than audiences were used to at the time. In A Fistful of Dollars, the mysterious gunslinger known to audiences as the Man with No Name is in fact briefly given a name within the film itself. During one scene, the town's undertaker addresses him as Joe, making it the only time in the dialogue that the character is referred to by any sort of name. This film marked the first collaboration between director Sergio Leone and composer Ennio Morricone. Leone was initially unsure about using Morricone, but after hearing Michele Lacerenza's striking trumpet performance during the early recording sessions, his doubts quickly vanished. Leone and Morricone had actually known each other since the 3rd grade, and their work on A Fistful of Dollars began a remarkable partnership that continued throughout all of Leone's later films. The director and several members of the cast and crew adopted anglicised names in an effort to make the film more appealing to international audiences, who were largely unfamiliar with the emerging spaghetti western genre. For example, director Sergio Leone credited himself as Bob Robertson. Mario Brega appears in all 3 films of the Dollars trilogy, and in each one his character meets an unfortunate end. In this installment, Brega plays Chico, who is crushed by a large runaway barrel after it is pushed towards him by Clint Eastwood. Notably, this is the only film in the trilogy in which Eastwood's character is directly responsible for the demise of one of Brega's characters. Although it is often described as the first spaghetti western, A Fistful of Dollars was not actually the first western produced in Italy. By the time the film was made, roughly 25 similar westerns had already been produced by Italian filmmakers. What set this film apart, however, was its reach. Unlike its predecessors, A Fistful of Dollars became the first of these Italian-made westerns to receive a major international release, bringing the style to a global audience and helping establish the spaghetti western as a major cinematic phenomenon. When the film first opened in Italy, it received largely negative reviews from critics. Nevertheless, strong admissions across Europe quickly turned it into a commercial success. When the film was later released in the United States, critics were similarly unkind. Despite the critical drubbing, audiences proved far more enthusiastic. Moviegoers flocked to see the film, and it ultimately earned around $14.5 million at the box office. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about A Fistful of Dollars. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.